Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. Chicago taxpayers paid more than $91 million in repeated misconduct by police officers. A WTTW News investigation breaks down the data.
Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates on the hopes and challenges of the new school year.
Don't underestimate how much of an impact you can make.
A local tutoring nonprofit says it's in urgent need of volunteers.
And a multidisciplinary artist is celebrating nearly 2 decades of work in his first solo show.
And now some of today's top stories. Closing arguments are set for tomorrow in the trial. There I am of Tim, well, no, not there. Now there I am. Tim Mapes, who was Michael Madigan's longtime chief of staff. Closing arguments tomorrow. The defense rested its case today after seeking to blame Mapes' mental health and state of mind for failure to recall certain conversations. Mapes is charged with perjury and obstruction of justice, with prosecutors alleging he made multiple false claims to a grand jury that was investigating Madigan, former lobbyist Mike McLean, and ComEd. And Illinois officials are responding to alleged bomb threats received at a handful of area public libraries. The reports that libraries in Oak Park, Park Ridge, and Gurnee experienced bomb threats and had to close down temporarily, although reports indicate that the threats were not credible. Today, Illinois Secretary of State Alexei Janulius, whose office serves as state's chief librarian, condemned the alleged threats, as did the ACLU, who blames the threats on misinformation and calls from some to ban what they view as controversial books. No word yet on any suspects in these threats.
Neighbors in the south suburbs are a step closer to having an airport. Leaders from the area celebrated today that the governor signed the South Suburban Airport Act. The law requires the Illinois Department of Transportation to start the pre-qualification process for vendors who can develop, finance, construct, and operate the future airport.
Finally, we need to make sure that the airport we build is the envy of the global aviation industry, as well as the foundation of local prosperity for generations to come.
Today's news conference was the first for Congresswoman Robin Kelly since she announced the death of her husband late last week. She thanked supporters who reached out since then.
Chicago's former corporation counsel is headed to Washington to serve as White House counsel. President Joe Biden taps Edward Siskel for that role. Siskel served as the city's top attorney under Mayor Rahm Emanuel after serving as counsel in the Obama administration. And there he is, sitting to Emanuel's right on the rostrum in City Hall. And Siskel also served in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, the White House counsel typically reviews the legal aspects of legislation, works on judicial nominees, and presidential pardons.
You know how the weather in Chicago is usually cooler by the lake? Not this week, as the state of Illinois is under an excessive heat warning for Wednesday and Thursday. The National Weather Service says temperatures in the upper 90s plus humidity mean heat indices could reach 105 to 115 degrees the next 2 days. The agency is advising people to reschedule any outdoor activities and pay special attention to the elderly, children, and pets. A quote, cold front could move in sometime on Thursday for a more moderate Friday, but the timing of its arrival is still uncertain.
I still think in January we'll be pining for the weather
Yeah,
this week. Coming up in the program, how Chicago Public Schools will cope with that coming heat wave.
But first, what the city is paying out in repeated police misconduct settlements right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A WTTW News analysis finds Chicago taxpayers paid more than $91 million to resolve lawsuits involving repeated misconduct by 116 police officers. The payouts, made out over 3 years, came in spite of efforts to rein in cops who repeatedly violate the rules. WTTW News reporter Heather Schroen joins us now with what she and Jared Rutecki found. So Heather, break down these numbers for us. How big a problem does the city have on its hands with respect to police officers that are sued repeatedly?
In all, it cost Chicago taxpayers $198 million in 2019, 2020, and 2021 to resolve police misconduct cases. 47% of that cost involved cases that included officers named who had committed multiple allegations of police misconduct. ballooning the total by nearly $100 million.
And some of these officers were in the double digits here. You found officers who were sued as many as 12 times for misconduct.
Right. 2 of those officers actually ended up in jail in connection with that conduct that cost the city nearly $1 million. However, the officer that cost the city the most in this 3-year period was Detective Ronaldo Guevara, a former police detective accused of framing dozens of Chicagoans. In this 3-year period, he cost taxpayers $40 million, and there are another 12 cases pending against him, including one filed by a woman who ended up on death row based on his investigation.
So if officers had been accused, how come there's this problem where they're getting accused over and over again and the city's not maybe sidelining them?
Yeah, so there's no system set up in the city to track individual officers with individual court cases. It is a significant problem identified by Inspector General Deborah Wisberg, who says it leaves an opportunity for reform on the table. Essentially, lawsuit data is siloed in one place in the city systems, and police misconduct data is in another system, and they don't talk to themselves.
And a lot of this data comes from the tenure of Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but what has current Mayor Brandon Johnson said about this?
Well, I reached out to the former mayor. She sent a statement saying that she worked diligently to sort of reduce police misconduct and reduce the cost to taxpayers, but she acknowledged she left office with work undone. The current mayor's office didn't respond to my request for comment, but the law department said that they're working on a new system that will track these cases in an attempt to better manage the risk that the city faces and how the police department operates. However, that system isn't scheduled to be in place until March 2024.
All right, and a new superintendent about to take hold, so perhaps this will be something on his agenda. Heather Schroen, thanks very much.
Thanks, Paris.
And go read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, one-on-one with the head of the Chicago Teachers Union on the upcoming school year.
The new school year is always exciting, and that was on full display yesterday as Chicago Public Schools opened. Here's Mayor Brandon Johnson, himself a former middle school teacher and Chicago Teachers Union organizer, kicking off the first day of school. Joining us now to talk about some of the hopes and challenges for the new school year is Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates. We will hear from CPS CEO Pedro Martinez on our show next week. Stacey, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So there's been a lot that's been said yesterday and today about the influx of new migrant students, especially on the first day. What do we know about whether or not there's enough Spanish-speaking teachers to support those students?
Well, we know there's not enough of anything to support our migrant families in the city. We are living the legacy of the destruction of the social safety net. And so when we have been talking about affordable housing for years, this is the result of not having it when you see families living outside of police stations. Beyond that, our school district has not put an emphasis over time on making sure that we have multilingual teachers in our school communities. And we are feeling the pain of that right now. What I will say what's different this year than it has been in years past is that there is an overall acknowledgement of the need to recruit more multilingual teachers to the Chicago Public Schools, to make sure that the ones that we have are given some agency. We are engaging on a very granular level, I would say, with the city and the school district on how to offer families what they need and how to fill in gaps.
What are some of your concerns then? You just named some of them, but for the migrant students who are coming, obviously there's the language barrier, but also they're carrying some trauma.
Well, again, when we said a nurse and a social worker in every school, We needed that for the traumatic impacts that our children had previously. That need has grown exponentially. So we are saying yes to what we've already said yes to. Again, the difference now is that we are actually working cooperatively on solutions to make sure that our young people, our families, the people who have been here already are getting what they need.
What would you say some of that cooperation looks like, and what are some of those potential solutions that you all are working on?
So right now we have a group of our members who are going from shelter to police station to make sure that our young people are enrolled in the Chicago Public Schools. So right now our members are enrolling students in the system right now. That was unheard of before this administration. So that's one thing we're doing. We continue to work with community agencies all over the city to make sure that we are offering language support to families. We are working in mutual aid efforts to make sure that there's clothing, that there are toiletries, and that we're just meeting the need. We are a part of the coalition now. We're not fighting to be a part of the coalition.
Of course, there are reports, though, that some of the migrant students have been turned away from their schools, despite whether or not they were enrolled with the support of CTU or otherwise. What are you hearing? Have students been turned away from schools?
Well, I haven't heard that one. I did read it, but I haven't heard that one. What I will say is that, again, the Chicago Public Schools for years has suffered from a leadership that wasn't responsive to the needs on the ground. I will say that we've had great response. Deputy Mayor Jen Johnson is a former member,
CTU, of course,
chief of staff. She has been tremendous about understanding member concerns on the ground and being able to point us in the right directions and to connect the need to the resource.
Heat's expected to soar tomorrow. CPS says that every classroom has at least a window unit, but what about the rest of the buildings? Gym, cafeteria, hallways. What are your concerns there?
Well, I have many concerns there. I'm a parent in the Chicago Public Schools as well, and we are existing in a climate crisis currently. There is zero institution in America right now that is prepared to meet the demands of this climate crisis. However, again, this time, we have collaboration. And so we've had more interaction with the Chicago Public Schools and the City of Chicago on this issue within the last week than we've had in 3 years with the COVID crisis.
What more can the district do to be kind of prepared for these extreme swings in temperature and weather?
Well, what I would say, number one, is that there's an immediate, there's a short, and there's a long-term solution. So I'll start with the long-term. The long-term is that in the occasion of the 10-year facilities master planning that the district is undergoing right now, we have to make a commitment to have green, sustainable school facilities for our children across the city. We also have to go into school communities like Washington High School on the south side of Chicago and assess that that building was never supposed to be permanent and make a commitment to put the funding there to build a green, sustainable school facility, both the high school and the elementary school. So that's a long term, right? And so what I would say a shorter term goal is that we have to have a very robust master planning process that involves the voices of the community, and we have to be equitable with that. No one knew during the Rahm Emanuel and Lori Lightfoot administrations how a school would receive upgrades or how a school will receive long-term renovations or even a new school for that matter. Now we have the opportunity to put forth a different face of this and actually engage the community. But on a more immediate level, what we have is collaboration. So our safety teams are going to be back up and running tomorrow to make sure that we are working hand in glove with building level administration and central office administration to make sure that heating and the heat that will permeate many of our buildings tomorrow is kept at bay. And that's going to require, our principals to respect the voices of those who are doing the work, but also the immediate response of the district to meet those needs. We've been assured in multiple engagements that will happen.
So there's also the teacher shortage, because obviously we talked about the difficulty with having enough, multilingual teachers, but the teacher shortage in general, why is it so difficult to recruit enough teachers?
Well, for probably a generation now, men have been beating women over the head about how we teach, what we teach, and when we teach it. I would be remiss if I didn't say that our profession is overwhelmingly female. Our membership in Chicago is over 85% female, in fact. We have to connect the fact that this country has an addiction to marginalizing women, and that is our work as well. But beyond that, we also have an addiction to underfunding and devaluing the public school system in this country as well. And then the third thing that I would add to that is that when you graduate from college, by and large, you're graduating with a good amount of debt. And the salaries for our beginning teachers is less than what it needs to be. And so we have to, number one, restore the dignity and the respect to the profession. And so that's why you see our advocacy as strident as it is. And number two, we have to do better about resourcing our school communities so it is a fun place, a meaningful place for young people and the adults to engage. And then finally, you have to pay people their worth. We educate the world. We educate every profession. I would think that that's the most important infrastructure to our democracy.
On the topic of shortages, we've got about 20 seconds. There's also the bus driver shortage. Particularly, there are concerns for special education students and their ability to learn. What should be done there?
Listen, we are working with the city and the district right now to make sure that we get environmentally friendly buses. I think we have to bring that in-house. We cannot continue to outsource busing. And again, I need to say it because this is what's happening nationally. You have to pay people to do work in this city. And that's going to require people to do something different than they've done before.
And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to hear more from CPS CEO Pedro Martinez on this. But this is Stacey Davis Gates, Chicago Teachers Union President. Thanks again for joining us, Stacey. Good to see you. And for more on back to school safety, join our own Joanna Hernandez next Monday, August 28th at noon for our next virtual Chicago Tonight Voices community conversation. To RSVP, visit WTTW.com/events. Up next, details on a tutor shortage in Chicago. Stay with us. What does justice for Emmett Till look like for you?
Justice for, in our sense, is to serve humanity.
Black storytelling is a huge part of our culture, and so we wanted to make sure we gave young writers the opportunity to share their stories.
I think it's important that people feel empowered and find a light within themselves, whether it's art or not, but if it can be sparked with an idea, I think that's the type of things that change the world.
Chicago students are still struggling to make up for COVID-era learning losses, and a local tutoring organization is trying to help them close that gap. But with demand higher than ever before, the nearly 60-year-old nonprofit says it needs many more volunteers to step up and work with students in need. Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg joins us now with more. So tell us about this group's work.
Well, Paris, as you mentioned, Tutoring Chicago is a long-running organization. It began when Montgomery Ward employees started tutoring students in Cabrini Green. Now they work around the city. Executive Director Sandy Merrick says the number of students the organization tutors has quadrupled over the last decade, and that the pandemic has only made the need more dire.
Their reading is still behind, their math is still behind, which actually also impacts their confidence. So we're able to, have customized learning experiences for them. Unfortunately, the demand is very high. What we really need is more tutors. The more tutors that we get, the more impact that we can make on the students.
When they say demand is very high, how very high?
Well, Merrick says the group's been working with more than 1,100 students in grades 1 through 10, mostly CPS, but some charter and Catholic school attendees as well. They're expecting record enrollment this year, topping previous numbers, and they're opening a new location on the south side to join their north and west side locations, as well as expanding their digital offerings.
The one-to-one tutoring is really like a customized learning experience for the student, and it's also like a mentorship. Some of our tutors stay with the same student for like 3 to 5 years, so they actually, have a really good relationship with them and are able to, make a bigger impact for them.
So what are students provided here?
They get 90 minutes of free one-to-one tutoring every week. Families who need it also get a Chromebook and tech help. Now, as for the tutors, they get training and a customized lesson plan. Merrick's actually going to be tutoring a student herself this year and says while it felt a little daunting, the group makes it easy for people without experience to help a student. I also spoke with Gil Fitzgerald, a returning tutor. He says he was a bit apprehensive too, but that the experience was worth it. Fitzgerald started working with a student who he says is a passionate kid and a talented artist, but he was in 3rd grade reading at a 1st grade level. So they focused on sight words, words that you can't just sound out, but that you have to memorize.
We worked really hard every single week, and that's what it takes. You got to put in your best effort, but you could see it in his confidence, and even his mom gave me a note at the end of the year just saying how much of an impact we made. So it was terrific. It felt great, and I can't wait to do it again this year.
Fitzgerald says the student he tutors is now reading proficiently at his grade level. Part of what drew Fitzgerald to tutoring, his own experiences in school.
I had tutors for multiple different subjects from, I would say, 1st grade up through high school, and it made a profound impact on me academically, helped my confidence, and I know a lot of students out there don't have those same types of opportunities, so don't underestimate the amount of impact one individual can have. You can really change the trajectory on a student's life.
According to a Tutoring Chicago survey, more than 90% of the teachers who work with students who go through this tutoring program reported improvements in reading and math. And Paris, we've got a link to the organization on our website.
All right, a lot of need right now. Nick, thanks very much.
Absolutely.
And up next, a local artist is celebrating nearly 2 decades of work in a solo exhibition. But first, a look at that upcoming heat wave.
A local screen printer is debuting his life's work for the first time ever at a Southside Art Center. Arts correspondent Angel Edo shares more on how he's using the medium to connect with Black and brown communities.
This is Multiples and Multitudes. It's an exhibition that spans my work over the last, 15, 18 years.
For the last nearly 2 decades, artist William Estrada has been practicing art of all mediums. Those visuals are now on display at the Hyde Park Art Center.
So there's multiple projects being exhibited as part of the exhibition. The Family Portrait Project came about from a conversation that I was having with my mother about our multiple migrations, right, and moving across the city, across the nation. I've taken between 12 and 15,000 photographs, but then of individuals and families, I have probably around 5,000.
Estrada's experience extends beyond photography. He currently teaches screen printing at UIC, but has teaching roots further south as well.
All right, folks, let's get started. Let me know how I can help. I've been working at the Hyde Park Art Center as a teaching artist because it's really guided a lot of the thinking and a lot of the ways that I make with community members and public. So Hyde Park Art Center is one of the best places where I could have my first solo exhibition, and it has been a huge influence in my practice. But if you're gonna do light colors, always do the light colors first. Now I live in Cicero, and most of my work happens in Lodo Village in North Lawndale. So part of the conversations that I was interested in having, specifically in that intersection of Pulaski, Cermak, and Ogden, is that it's this border, right, between Black and brown neighborhoods. So I was really interested in engaging conversations with Black and brown families specifically, thinking about, how we're represented, the lack of representation also, but also thinking about the rich histories that exist in our neighborhoods.
And with that, Estrada and his screen printer hit the streets. And unlike other mediums, the artist says screen printing is both accessible and affordable.
Most of these are works that I created in collaboration with others, right? There's these prints right here that were actually created through the Mobile Street Art Cart. These all were created with the intention of the public finishing them off. And a lot of the prints that I create are very reminiscent of coloring sheets, or as the exhibition referred to them as Mad Libs, right? Where the public is invited to add to them and to finish them. Thinking about like the conversation that we were having with North Lawndale residents, right? Around reclaiming the neighborhood, right? To the violence that is happening across Chicago, and being able to reclaim spaces, right? So they feel safe to us and so they feel safe to our neighbors. I think I want to remind folks that there is so much beauty and brilliance in Black and brown communities. We need to invest in it, and we need to support it, and we need to celebrate it so more art can be created in Black and brown communities.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
You can see William Estrada, Multiples and Multitudes at the Hyde Park Art Center now through October 29th.
And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing and get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. A check-in on how the first week of school is going with our Spotlight Politics team.
And Mayor Brandon Johnson marks his 100 days in office this week. A look at his administration so far. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and cool out there. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.